Another episode of AARP's periodic show on the mental well-being of older adults. This recorded interview, along with previously recorded interviews, will be available on facebook.com/AARP Maryland, youtube.com/AARP Maryland, and aarp.org/MD. I am Dr. Lois Meszaros. I am a volunteer with AARP and a member of the Executive Council. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I work on issues involving the cognitive and behavioral health of older adults. Prior to my retirement, I was the Chief Operating Officer and Clinical Director for Chimes, Delaware. I am a former director of the Developmental Disabilities Administration in Maryland and a former director of psychological services in the health department, where I worked with local health department on various psychological issues. Currently, I have a private practice in Severna Park, Maryland, where I work with many older adults. Today, we're going to talk about what the United States Surgeon General has called an epidemic, specifically how older people, and actually people of any age, are vulnerable to loneliness and social isolation. And I certainly see it in my own clinical practice. But most importantly, we will discuss what is being done to help people. The important question is, can we treat loneliness and social isolation? Here to discuss this is Dr. Paolo Narciso, Vice President of New Program Development and Program Optimization at AARP's Foundation. He oversees the Foundation's work developing and managing effective solutions for vulnerable older adults. Prior to the foundation, he was a tech entrepreneur leading multiple startups. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us today to discuss this most important topic. Loneliness and isolation have been with us prior to the pandemic, but it seemed like it got so much worse for so many people during the pandemic. So can you tell us why it's so important for AARP and the foundation to study this? And secondly, how do you look at it? How do you define loneliness and social isolation?
Good morning, Lois. It's great to see you, and thank you for having me on this show. Thank you for all the Maryland AARP members as well. I've had a chance to meet people from Maryland, from the AARP Maryland throughout the years, and it's always been a pleasure. So thanks for having me on this show with talking about this very, very important topic. So the Foundation in AARP is focused on social isolation and loneliness for many, many years now. It is a key area of strategic focus. Specifically at the Foundation, we look at areas that would security essentials for older Americans in the United States, and particularly older Americans living with low income in the United States, which is the difference between AARP and the Foundation, because the Foundation is the charity, the official charity for AARP. As you said, Lois, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of focus on social isolation and loneliness. We were obviously separated from each other with a lot of the stay-at-home orders, around in the United States and in different states, and then obviously trying to secure, particularly older Americans that were living in nursing homes and assisted living facilities who were very vulnerable to the COVID virus. But as you said, it's been around a long time. It's been a very much a growing epidemic, not just here in the United States, but really all around the world. We look at social isolation and loneliness as two separate things, but obviously very related. Social isolation is what we call an objective state, where you can measure someone's level of disconnection. And it's disconnection from resources, disconnection from friends and family, disconnections from society. And there's various levels of that. And there are close to about 28 different clinical measures of social isolation. So you could objectively measure it. At the foundation, in the past, we've used a measure called DSSI, which is the Duke Social Support Index that would measure that. Loneliness is something that is not measurable objectively. It is a subjective feeling. You could be in a party, huge crowd, and feel completely lonely. And it's more about a feeling of not belonging, feeling out of place, not being able to be identified with a particular group, family, and so forth. So different, but very, very much related to each other. Both of them have very serious health effects if you are socially isolated or lonely. Social isolation is equivalent in our studies to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which is a lot of cigarettes in terms of how it increases morbidity and other obviously issues, health issues and health outcomes because of social isolation. Loneliness is seen very similarly to social isolation. And it's a problem that, as you said, not just for older adults, but for pretty much every single age group, but older adults being very vulnerable as we lose our friends, our loved ones, our spouses and partners, specifically as we age, or even when we retire, and where we've had that social connection with everybody at work, and then all of a sudden we're in retirement. It does increase the chance of social isolation.
Yeah, I know in my private practice, older people keep saying to me their world seems to be getting smaller. They lose loved ones, friends. So I know what you're saying is very, very true. But you gave us a great background, but now we need to give some solutions to these people. And let's be as practical as we can, because we want to give them tools to work with so they can help themselves and help people in their lives and their friends. And I know there are many things that people can do to combat isolation and social loneliness. And I know you're a techie expert, but I'm going to ask you to please start with the old-fashioned, non-technical ways of improving isolation and loneliness.
Yeah, I love the old-fashioned way. That is actually, while I am a techie, as you said, there's nothing that substitutes for the old-fashioned approaches of dealing with social isolation and loneliness. Because they're two different, let me start with social isolation first. It's and both of them are incredibly challenging. When somebody's socially isolated, they have been conditioned to be socially isolated. They've been rejected so many times that they start to disconnect from society, friends, family, things of that particular nature. Start becoming very much more reclusive. But also let me state that you could be socially isolated and not lonely. There are people who choose to be able to be socially isolated as well. And there were kind of very different conditions and very different approaches. But let's assume that you're not choosing to be socially isolated. You become socially isolated over time. My request for everybody in terms of the old-fashioned way to do this is we a lot of times put the burden on the person who's socially isolated to try to do something about it. I will propose that that's not what we do. I propose that the people who should be doing something are the friends and family, the people who are attached to the older adult specifically, and that we go out and try to connect with them. Again, a lot of times social isolation, the person becomes socially isolated, not on purpose, because of the fact that they've been rejected so many times, right? They want to do something with a friend and family. Person says, I'm too busy. And then they keep isolating back and forth. They want to make a phone call, the other end is not picking up the line, right? So you start being isolated at that particular point. We even see it in public service or public services. Someone's trying to get a particular benefit and they keep getting denied the benefit. So it keeps disconnecting all the way across. Driving is a good example of that, where somebody used to drive, eyesight, other issues come into play. Now they cannot drive. And so they're losing those resources, right? And so they get disconnected. So it is incumbent upon us, the people around them, to try to connect with them. And that means picking up the phone, inviting them to do different things, reaching out to them specifically, dropping by. And sometimes when you call them and say, can I come by? They probably say, no, don't worry about it. I'm fine. It's a very normal reaction. Stop in. You drop in and drop something off and check in with them. We've seen that to be very, very effective. Other countries, for instance, like Japan, the postal service actually is knocking on the door of older people and making sure they spend time talking with them versus just dropping off the letter, knowing it's such a big issue. And if you try to actually schedule a time, they won't schedule a time. So doing these drop-ins are really, really important to be able to help a person become more connected, to society. They will reject you. That is very normal, as a normal reaction. But keep trying. That's very, very important to do. Do simple things like, if you're going somewhere, say you're going to the grocery, pick up the phone or walk by and say, hey, I'm going to the grocery. You want to come with me? So simple things like that. It's a great old-fashioned way, but I hate you even say it's old-fashioned. It is the best way to get connected with people, particularly those who are socially isolated. Now, if you are socially isolated and you want to try to do something yourself, that's a behavioral change. You have to work on it. As we get older, it's harder to make friends, right? Because we lose that when we're kids, right in the playground. Everyone's our friend. Within 5 minutes, the entire playground's our best friend. It's a lot different when we get older, again, mostly through conditioning. But there are things you could do, and it's a behavioral change. Simple things like just scheduling a time, literally make it a to-do list to go and call a friend or family, call someone to be able to talk to, go outside, and you say hello to people when you're walking outside. My daughter gets embarrassed when I do that. I walk outside and just start talking to people, or in the mall and just say hi to everyone. That helps in terms of doing things for yourself. Things like going to church, social clubs, those are really important things to do. And you may not know anybody there, so it's easier just to do it. If there's an activity, just join the activity, whether it's bridge, mahjong, whatever it is, gardening, and just even if you're quiet, you'll see that everybody ultimately connects with you, and that's a very helpful thing to do.
But, I have older people that I work with, and there are organizations that will do what they call buddy calls. And they'll call the person every day and talk to them just for a few minutes and to make sure they're all right. And there are even some support groups in the area that really are very open and work with older people who are feeling lonely and isolated. But as you mentioned, when people can't drive, it does become a little bit more of a problem. So we have to hook them up with transportation sometimes to get to these groups. But they were great suggestions. Thank you so much. And now we're going to get into your field of expertise, the technologies. I hear about artificial intelligence, don't know a lot about it, but looking forward to what you're going to tell us because it's really fascinating.
Yeah, so the tech solutions, particularly the tech solutions that we've developed at AARP Foundation are not meant to be end-all be-all solutions. the goal of our solutions is to get somebody to be on-ramped into a physical connection, right? Whether that be, as you said, Lois, volunteering, which is a fantastic way of both helping with social isolation and loneliness. Those are just excellent. Either as the volunteer, or as you said, when you're making the phone calls or picking up people for the rides, you're the beneficiary of that. It's a fantastic approach, which has been scientifically proven, medically proven to help people become much more connected and also reduce loneliness. So those are great. So our tech solutions are really meant just to on-ramp people to those face-to-face meetings if possible. There are obviously things that in technology like Zoom or what we see today, which really actually we've learned the pandemic actually do work quite a bit. There were a lot of folks that couldn't get to things even before the pandemic, and then Zoom came on and everybody started using Zoom, and the engagement in a lot of events that are online just increased significantly. So but let me get back into your question regarding the tech solutions. So at the foundation, we deployed AI in many situations. We deployed it both as a voice product with Amazon Alexa in our Connected Communities project that was ultimately taken over by Parker Life, a big organization out of New York State. And also we launched a chatbot, which we launched on March the 17th. March 13th of 2020 is when we all got told to stay home. So just a few days after that, we launched a chatbot that uses AI. And AI is nothing more than a large language model, right? It's just actually learning from our interactions and then trying to put together a conversation based on the most probable best word to use after a particular word. It's probably the best way for me to describe what that is. Now, it learns from our interactions with it, and it's obviously read the internet. All the large language models have read all the way through the internet, all the way up to 2021, much faster than we could read the internet. So don't ask an AI to say, how did the Orioles do last night, because it won't know, because that happened last night versus 2021. Ask it what happened in 2021. It's good. But that's all really what a large language model is. It just predicts it, and we can train it to be able to communicate with you. So we did that. We trained an AI to be able just to be used as a chat tool, and people just chat with it like you're having a normal standard communication with it. But we actually set prompts, and that has been very effective. We signed up roughly around 70,000 people within the first 3 months of that chatbot being released, which is, regardless of your age, we all use chat, but older adults specifically adopted it very, very quickly. And knowing it was a chatbot, and knowing it wasn't a real live human being, but it obviously has the ability to be able to connect you to a live human being at that point. It is, again, just a tool that helps people start communicating, start going back and forth, learning those old communication skills. We did add some behavioral components to it, some behavioral therapy components to it that helped you kind of get out of your shell slowly. Prompts that, for instance, said, hey, have you called your daughter today, or you want to put that on your to-do list, or would you like me to send you a reminder to call XYZ person at that point? So those are some of the things that we did with AI. And the good news about AI is that it's improving every single day. And in fact, as you've all heard in the news with things like ChatGPT and Bard from Google and others out there, there's almost hundreds of new solutions that are coming out that are using an AI model to converse with you. And it's just you're talking to a real live human, because it will learn from how you communicate to it. And we find that to be effective, but only effective in terms of trying to get somebody to actually connect in face-to-face, real-time, the old-fashioned way.
Okay. What about virtual reality, traveling, being able to see things in other areas, in other countries? I mean, that sounds fascinating too. I'm glad you let us know that that artificial intelligence isn't going to take over the world, that it has very, very useful and helpful ways to deal with social isolation and loneliness. What about insurances and covering these amazing technologies that you have? A lot of our people are very limited financially, very limited resources. How do you deal with something like that?
Yeah, great question. Let me get back to your first question around virtual reality. In 2019, we launched a product called Alco VR by AARP. It was a place that you could go wearing a virtual reality headset, where you could experience things like traveling, for instance. And the fun thing about it is you could do it with somebody else, as if they were in the same room with you. So there was an experience on Alco that allowed you to drive Route 66 across the United States, and you do it together, right? There's experiences where you travel and visit London and do a tour of London. Experiences where you could listen to a chamber orchestra. The key thing about those solutions was that it allowed you to have somebody else there with you that was communicating with you in real time. So for me, for instance, my mom lived overseas. We would go on Alco all the time, and we would do things together. Sometimes it was actually sitting in a virtual living room together and talking, which is just a lot better than Zoom, right? But we were just in a virtual.
Absolutely.
But doing the experiences together is what bonds people more, when you experience something together. So we did things like diving off the coast of Hawaii to swim with dolphins, right? Things that we probably would not be able to do in real life, we could do in virtual reality. And that really helped us kind of build the connections and help with the loneliness issues of being apart. Particularly during the pandemic, she couldn't travel. She was stuck in a particular country for 2 years, right? And that was a way to be able to connect. And she was 86 at that time. So she's probably gonna kill me for telling on this. I hope she doesn't listen to this.
But all her friends are listening.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm really worried. So that is, some of the ways we've used some of the new technology, and there'll be more. So the question about how do you get this paid for? Things like the chatbots, which are multiple out there, and you can we'll put them in the resource page. You could go to connecttoeffect.org, which is the foundation's site specifically focused on social isolation and loneliness, that will give you resources to be able to look at. These are free resources, so you don't have to pay for them, right? The paid solutions out there are a lot of AIs that potentially move you into a behavioral therapist or a psychologist that would help you out. Those at that point become paid. And there are insurance plans, and CMS, Center for Medicaid and Medicare, are actually piloting many of these today. As you've said, Lois, our Surgeon General is very strong about this and is working with CMS for a lot of these solutions that then make these services reimbursable through Medicaid and Medicare. But check to see it in your plan first before you actually engage with them. That is, in fact, reimbursable. There are codes that the doctor would use to put into the system, the patient record, that makes it allows the bill to become reimbursed. So check with your plans first, because depending on which state you live in, but also from a Medicaid perspective, but from Medicare and the Medicare Advantage standpoint, look at your plans to see, what gets paid for and what doesn't. But our solutions are all free, and so you can access our solutions at no cost.
Thank you. That is very, very helpful. We are running out of time here very quickly. So I'm going to ask you, do you have one last statement for us before we have to close?
Yeah, again, it's an encouragement for everybody. Those who, I know I talked a lot about social isolation, but specifically loneliness. There's nothing wrong with being lonely. A lot of times people feel guilty for being lonely. I try to tell people that loneliness is nothing more than your body telling you that you need to have a connection with someone, right? And you belong with somebody. It is no different than feeling hungry. You feel lonely. Your body is hungry because you haven't eaten something. So it's telling you to put something in your body. When you feel lonely, it's telling you to be able to connect with people. Do not feel embarrassed by that. And it requires us to be a bit more vulnerable and tell people, hey, you know, I'm feeling a little bit lonely, or I feel like I don't belong in some place. And then you get to connect. I would always encourage you, and there's a book and studies done by by the Cleveland Clinic, and it's it very much works out there, is to find 6 people that you know at the drop of the hat you can pick up the phone and talk to and share something with. That has been seen to increase our health and reduce all of these issues around isolation and loneliness. But it requires you to be vulnerable, to be able to reach out to people, accept that you're feeling lonely, and that's okay, right? And then share that with other folks. And I'm almost 100% sure they're feeling the same thing in many ways. And so you're not the only one. You're not alone. And I would encourage everyone in this call, whether you feel lonely, whether you don't, at times when we feel that way, is to both be the person that reaches out and to also feel that it's okay to be vulnerable and reach out to others as well.
And it's okay to not be okay. So reach out to other people and they'll respond to you. I don't know how to thank you. This has been wonderful and so informative. And it will be followed by a resource page so that people will be given some resources. And we hope that our listeners have found this discussion to be helpful. And again, Dr. Narciso, I don't know how to thank you enough. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Lois. Thanks for having me.